The whole Liam Kumar Day effect, not really happening.
Nigel couldn't make it.
Yeah.
I rang up Mendon all, he said he could make it.
Don't dig this hole. Phil, credit to the guy, always manages to do well what he has to. He is a shocking person right now. You guys got a trophy? No.
It was pre-vim.
No, my life from Rashad Mendon.
Right, you guys, I'm a tag jack! I'm a fucking tag!
Hello and welcome to another episode of the LOC Report. Commissioner Stubbs back again, and as always, forever and always, joined by the co-host Chris Leach. How's it going, Chris?
Good evening. Yes, I'm all right, thank you. I'm all right. So it's it's that sort of mid-December. I have no idea where I am, what time it is, what's going on. It's far too dark. Horrendous weather. But yeah, it's nearly there. It's only a week and a half to Christmas, so
yeah. You're not wrong there. I mean, I went for appointment today, and the weather was absolutely disgusting, hail and everything. It was feral, is how I would describe it. And you're not kidding about not knowing what time it is, because I've got a beer in hand, and I'm on holiday now until the 2nd of January. So,
hateful, absolutely. Congratulations to you. I have to say that's a touch. That is.
Well, you know, I save up the holiday to take it off. You know, just to have a nice long break at the end. We can't all have 6 months off in one hit, right? And you know,
wasn't for free.
I didn't. No, I don't very much know. That's true. It's true. But enough of that, because week 14 in the books has just happened. Obviously, it's the craziest weekend really of fantasy, because it's obviously the one where we figure out exactly who's going to the playoffs, who isn't. So we'll obviously cover off all of that in this show. We've obviously only got then the one preview, this week as well, which will be the Wildcard Bowl, of course. But so what we're going to do, which we haven't really done in seasons past, but I've meant to kind of do, is we're going to do some season recaps with the bit of extra time that we have. So this week, at the end, after we've done all the normal show, we'll recap the 9th to 12th position teams, and then next week we'll do the other non-playoff teams and the loser of the Wildcard Bowl. So we'll do Tyson Boat on some people's seasons, so you've got something to look forward to there. But yeah, without further delay, let's just get into the week 14 madness now. We're going to do this sort of like match of the day style, so we'll do it sequentially. We won't announce the results of the play. We'll go along each game and talk about, you know, kind of what the impact it has on the playoff picture, and then obviously at the end of that we'll recap all of that, but we'll do it that fun way. Oh no, that's completely the wrong jingle. We don't want that one. I need the recap jingle. Here we go. Okay, so generally, just before we get to the marquee matchup, it was a pretty weak scoring week overall, wasn't it, Chris? Only one team went over 100 points, and that team wasn't even a playoff team.
No, that came out of nowhere as well. So yeah, you're dead right. Scoring was definitely down. I think it's a combination of short weeks, bad QB play. Again, it's a very defensive league this year as well.
It is.
So yeah, every week's not going to be crazy, but yeah. Key injuries everywhere was going on, but yeah, Badette is great, Scott. Unfortunately for Ollie, I mean, you know, it's the battle of the benches in this game. He's going to be sick to the core when he sees that bench and what could have been. Yeah. But yeah, not much different for Jeff, I have to say. But he managed to get line with 81 points, which wasn't a terrible week score, but yeah, justice for Rashad White on the bench there all year. He's been a consistent performer, and yet in the key game he gets dropped, but it doesn't matter in the end. Whilst Ollie somehow managed to luck into getting Zeke, and despite all the signs that he was going to get all the carries and all the workload, still didn't play him, and that was the difference, really. It was, unfortunately.
Pretty much, yeah. I kind of don't blame Ollie for not throwing Zeke in straight away, because what we'd seen of the Patriots offense up to that point, I know you obviously had Ramondre and he'd been serviceable, but entering this week, Ollie was obviously on the outside looking in of playoffs. He not only needed to beat Jeff by 15 to potentially get the points forward wildcard, but then obviously depending on what happened elsewhere, you know, the more points he got, kind of the better footing it would have put him on. So I kind of get not going for Zeke because, as you say, the touches might have been there, but there was no guarantee of the higher upside of the points. Obviously, no upsets in this game. Just generally across the week, though, we did have some upsets, and I mean, you've already kind of hit on it, Chris. Here, 82 points, 65 points. This was a bit of a theme for the playoff teams this week as well. Seemingly, none of them wanted to really win that much, and bizarrely, this particular game, as we previewed last week, it wasn't actually so much the win that was important, because with these two, Jeff was the holder of the points forward wild card entering this week, and as I say, Ollie was kind of in the chase for that as well. We did have some injuries across the league, and Ollie kind of was affected by a couple of here as well, which again could have played a role here. With Nico Collins, he went down pretty early on, and Jerome Ford, he injured his hand at one stage there as well. You picked right in this one though, Chris. You picked Great Scott, I picked Ollie, so we split the series there. But with the points beneficial there by Great Scott, as I said, he already had the points forward wildcard. This obviously put him ahead of Ollie, so the points in the win effectively guarantees him a playoff berth by way of the points forward wildcard. We'll obviously see what else happened elsewhere, and ultimately where Jeff did end up. Another point to point out is obviously Jeff, he did move off Trevor Lawrence, which we actually for much of the game was the wise decision because he was struggling for a lot of that game. He did marginally outscore Russell Wilson in the end, which you can see there, but obviously didn't really matter too much on the end. You already kind of hit on it. Rashad White was kind of the odd choice there, and again, with a win and a Dream Team loss and a 15-point or more outscoring of the Dream Team, Great Scott could have actually taken the pulse of the division. So we'll obviously see what happened in Viv's game in a second to see where Great Scott did ultimately end up. But there's two guys for Great Scott's team which did disappoint quite a lot. The rest of it, there's not really, as you kind of said, Chris, not really a great deal to call out across the two sides. But Jamar Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown only combined for 5 points together. Yeah. Jake Branning's been pretty good. Obviously, Goff and St. Brown's been good all year long. It was quite surprising.
Yeah, totally, and I get it. I get it when it comes to Chase. I mean, yeah, you're right. Brown's been really good, but yeah, a 34-point win or a 20-point margin, you would think that he'd be a bit more involved than that. But St. Brown's a strange one because as the focal point of the offense, really through the air, you would like to think again. In a matchup like that against Chicago, but they just didn't get going. That was the problem. No. Is they just didn't get going, and yeah, they're a different beast indoors than they are outdoors for sure. It's strange on the bench there as well, because you look at Great Scott's bench. It's obviously all running backs apart from Trevor Lawrence. So there's no way you can really turn there.
No.
So yeah, but then again, you wouldn't with those guys. They're going to have bounce backs, and that isn't the foundation of the team. I was a bit cruel to Ollie, saying that was the difference of playing Zeke or not, because really the Nico Collins injury is pretty bad, but also Jalen Hurts against the Cowboys.
Yes,
he's shitting his pants.
Yeah,
has not helped matters at all.
No, and he's been remarkably. He's been, I think, the most consistent quarterback this year. Just flashing up his points here, he's had, apart from if you exclude week 1, he's not dipped below 19 points effectively at all season, and even week 1 was 15, but more often than not you can see he's above 20, so yeah, really did, and of course, yeah, with this loss, that means, Ollie needed a win to make his playoff options a bit more interesting. He can still make the playoffs with this loss, but it depends, he needs help from elsewhere, basically, to give him a route to the playoffs. So what else did I know? Oh, there's also a stealth bench points here, Chris, because Ollie had the Saints D playing the Panthers for much of the weekend, and he pivoted later in the week to the Texans versus the Jets, and the Saints got 23. It still doesn't change the result of the game on its own, but like you say, maybe another couple of other decisions here and there, but yeah.
So, make the victory so much easier, Nate.
Indeed. So that's the marquee matchup. So Jeff's in the playoffs as a result of that. Ollie still needs some help, and this is the first time they played each other as well. So Ollie obviously takes the first. Jeff takes the first one of the series. So we'll go to the next playoff game here, which is the LOC Bowl between Ross's team, which last week was Art Attack, and this week is was Art Attack, but it's now Car Bears, and the LOC Bowl. we again split picks on this one, Chris, and you actually were very skeptical of my pick here, but I only went and smashed it because
I still am. I don't know how it happened. How the fuck is that team scored 98 points? You look down at it. It's actually quite a good week, but it's so indicative of the kind of week that it was across the league. Because when you've got Evan Ingram scoring 21 points, obviously we saw Njoku go for the same sort in a different game. Pitt's there, hasn't done anything all year, and then comes in for the biggest yards and touchdowns for a while. Kittle's there, Kelsey good yardage. So and kicker and D points stacking up. Dak Prescott going for it. Fair play. I mean, I'm not sure you saw quite this margin coming, but. No. But you saw it coming somewhat, but it doesn't help on the other side where Viv's had quite a good stat line from Lamb, Etienne and Breece Hall for sure. A little bit of the 49ers D, but just been let down by effectively playing with no quarterback, which is a big issue in the league. If you are without a quarterback points, then you are always not just on the back foot, but you're on the ground.
He did get injured in the game, but it must be pointed out that it was, I think, at least deep into the second quarter, may have even been the second half, where he injured himself, and he wasn't having a good game up to that point either, particularly.
Absolutely. So it was a difficult one there for him, and obviously Tyreek had his issues as well last night, which we haven't seen. He's been electric all year until this point. So unfortunately, falling at the final hurdle against that team of tight ends, which somehow is still functional. But yes, an unfortunate loss for Viv in a crucial time. Yeah,
like you said, this is probably the most Rost win possible. I don't, his tight end FC strikes again, berserking once again. And you say it was a costly loss for Viv because with the win, depending what happened in the goal game, he could have seized the number 1 seed. But with a loss, no hopes of that. However, given that Jeff only outscored him by 10 points, Viv does still secure the division, or on a margin of about 5 points or so. We'll look at that at the end. But
lucky.
Yeah, very lucky, because those 5 points are the difference between a bye and not a bye. So, extremely lucky indeed. You kind of hit on it there. Obviously, Lamb, a good week, not necessarily as much as he's got. I kind of mentioned in the preview last week that they've been very, very reliant on Hill and Lamb lately to mask some problems. But really, this again, you kind of said the three of them, but Etienne and Hall did pick up the slack a bit. And that, to be honest, they actually probably saved Viv's blushes, if anything, because if they didn't have the days they had, you're looking at a very, very low score. And as we just said, Viv would be playing it in the Wildcard Bowl for sure. So that's that one. The history of this matchup all time. Where's that list gone? The Dream Team is now 7-5 all time against Ross's team. So we'll go on to the battle of the Winchester Division leader and the number 1 overall seed in Gridiron Gang UR Gold. Sorry, my thing is just frozen, so let me just restart that again. With these two, obviously UR Gold was the only team to have officially clinched already. It was just depending on would they retain the number 1 seed or not. So with Viv losing, that's one part of the equation, but Pat could have still caught them with a win and some points, but a win for your Gold would have cemented it. Meanwhile, for my team, a win would have cemented the division, and with the Dream Team loss, this would have meant I would have moved up to the 2nd seed. Potentially, depending on the Pat stat, but I would have avoided I would get a bye regardless, because I would have finished ahead of Viv, and win my team did. And not only did my team win, Chris, I went back to the well and backed myself, and I came through in a big spot for myself. So a little pat on the back there for me. So.
That's it. You need a significant pat on your back to your kicker.
Brandon St. Aubrey. Yes, 22 points.
So let's pat him on the back for a quarterback ball from a kicker. Wow, that doesn't happen very often. The usual suspects for you have come right. Allen solid enough, McCaffrey solid enough, and then the kicker and D score is otherworldly. And aside from that, there's some reasonably high single-digit points there, but not too bad. What's on the other side? Yeah, then you look at that kicker score and the kicker and D score, and that's somewhat the difference here. I know that. Laporte and Addison were pretty abject on the day. There wasn't, as far as I'm aware anyway, and you may be able to correct me here, on the bench there wasn't an unbelievable place to go.
Nowhere to turn, in fact.
So yeah, just a down day again for URGO. It seems to have been having this sort of peaks and troughs recently. Well, it
wasn't just a down day, it was a crashing back to earth, because they damn near enough scored 100 points less than they did the week before. But, again, you cast your eye around the league, 71 isn't actually a terrible score within the context. And ordinarily, like you say, for my team, if you strip things like the kicker and things away, it's quite an underwhelming week as well. But again, I think if you look elsewhere in the context, it's not necessarily so bad. Obviously missing Dell for the first week for me there as well. Purdy was fine for all of them, and again he obviously made what otherwise would have been a bad day even worse if he doesn't come through with that. But yeah, it does kind of, is a bit laid bare a bit what we think about URGold in terms of, we know Purdy's a solid option, but these skill positions are just not necessarily ones that you can really count on week to week.
Absolutely, we've seen, you're dead right, and we've seen in there, so we've seen the ceiling and floor, really, I would say, of this team in 2 weeks, maybe even a 3-week span, because the week previously played me and we had a similar score. In fact, it was worse. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's it's certainly one of those teams. But if you catch it on a bad week, you good matchups. Then yeah, it's good. But say that this was always going to be a difficult one. We noticed this in last week when we said Dallas, San Francisco, Philly sort of trifecta of matchups there for Brown, Metcalf, and Pollard. We're probably rookie this week, and so it's been.
Yeah, indeed. URGold would effectively either need a Pat Stan loss or Pat Stan win and not score enough points to outscore him to retain the number 1 seed. With that loss, the history of this matchup all time, Gridiron Gang is now 7-2 all time against URGold. So the next 2 games here aren't playoff games, so we'll just go through them quickly. But we do get one of these. Yeah, that's gotta hurt, Chris. That was going right into your skull by the looks of there. Because Bare Necessities, my dad's team, the rudderless ship, the team that started bye-week player, only went and had the highest score by 30-point margin compared to anyone else, beating Forward Flyers 130 points to 80 points last week.
Yeah, I thought 80 wasn't so bad this week. Andy's carried a player as well, so imagine if he'd just swapped it out. He'd had just a bit more. Yeah, there's a freak week for Dave. Look how many touchdowns there are across the board. There's so many. Decent D score, double quarterback score for Lamar. It's just all over the place. So yeah, from a week which was pretty tepid last week, obviously with the the drop players, only scored 83 points, whatever it was, with three guys missing last week. So he could have had that twice. So yeah. A good way to end the season. I think this is probably what Dave expected to see most of the season, but yeah, it hasn't.
I mean, this team would be, in with a good shout if they were in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I say it's just that on paper that just hasn't worked this year for some reason. It's just it's taken until the last 2 weeks of the season for it all to click, which is unfortunately a little bit too late. But the theory was there. For what it's worth, the theory was there. For my team, unfortunately, the theory has not been there all year. It's all been a bit disjointed. But fair play to Calvin Ridley, to Brandon Ayuk and Derrick Henry for making it interesting at least. Mm-hmm. Everybody else a little bit disappointing. Which caps off a pretty disappointing year all round. But it's been a fun end. Certainly more of a fun end than it started anyway.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
So yes, so in the game that meant nothing. Congratulations to Dave. That was quite some result, and that's all that needs to be said for either one of our seasons. We both want to forget them. Yeah,
sure, and that ends a 10-game losing streak for Bare Necessities as well, so it doesn't have to end with the ignominy of finishing with an 11-game losing streak to close the season. Yeah, and no bench points for you, so you both have silver linings in this game. So, then the next game we've got here, and again my browser is stuck for some reason, so I'll just do the old refresh here. Again, the next one we've got is Ixan against Tom's Tyrants. Again, both these teams eliminated from the playoffs, are just playing for fun. It was actually a fairly competitive game in the end. Tom's Tyrants, somewhat surprising. Oh, by the way, in the last game, we both picked Ben Necessities there, so we got that right, and you obviously picked me in the other game as well. But we both picked Ixan in this one, so we got the wrong side of it, and the ad isn't helping here because we can see none of the points for the players, so I'm just going to go ahead and refresh that again. I don't know why it's playing up today. Not really helpful, but yeah, Ben does not end up finishing with a winning record as Tom somehow finds a way to win after a very, very dismal crawl to the end of the season after injuries and obviously poor play. So yeah, Ben finishes 7-7. Tom likes to leave it late. Drake London and James Cook surging at the end of the season. It's a bit too late for even a Tom comeback, isn't it, Chris?
Unfortunately so. Yeah, that's the strength of this, is that James Cook's put up a QB number and no one else. Well, and Drake London turned up for the last game of the season, but yeah, it's been a difficult one for Tom. I think another theory team that got sort of rooked by either bad QB play, not having a QB, or just inconsistent offense. Mm-hmm. It's been a pretty up and down year for both teams, really. Ben's team's been supposedly or at least was put out to be pretty consistent. Unfortunately, hasn't really quite been that way for the best part, and we certainly haven't seen the best of Mahomes this year for one reason or another. But yeah, there were the consistent performances as we've seen in recent times. Mahomes and Evans, particularly Evans. Evans was completely shut down against Atlanta, which was one surprising, but two costly for Ben because that 9-point deficit you would like to think would probably have been there. But Hartman, Eckler, and Sutton were there. A bit of a head scratcher for Darius Slayton. And
as he said on the chat today, this was the one I jotted down. Jaden Reed would have given him the win, I believe, in this because I think he got. I'm pretty sure it would only just, but I think it would have changed the result here.
But certainly the Vikings D have spared his blushes a little bit there. Because skill position a bit grim for Ben. But yeah, fair play. Tom's overdue a win. I'm glad that the luck's kind of turned in his favour. And to say if there's 1 week where all the trash players start playing, it's going to be this one. So it's been. Indeed.
Andy left Cup on the bench as well for some unknown reason. So it could have been even better. So history of this one all time. Tom's Tyrants are now 9-12 against Ixan all time. So that brings us to the last game, which does return us to playoff relevance because Pat Stan now entering this with the other results as I've laid bare. So with the Great Scott win, effectively Pat had to win his game. Sorry, with the Great Scott win, and I think my win as well. Did my win come into play? No, I think with the I think my win came into play. Basically, the result was Pat Stan, as the result of the other games. Pat Stan had to win this game to not be eliminated from playoff contention without some ridiculous point swing anyway, which did not really happen. But Pat loses this one to the league's 12th ranked team, bucking the trend 82-62. And that effectively eliminates Pat Stan from the playoffs and brings Ollie into the points forward wildcard. Reason being, Pat Stan finished with the same record as Great Scott, but Great Scott had better points, so then it's the points forward wildcard up for grabs, of which Ollie had more points than Pat, so that is how Pat fell out of playoff contention here in week 14. You were saying when we were watching with Viv the games on Sunday that Viv asked you who do you think is going to win it all, and you think I still think it's going to be the year of Pat, and then Pat falls the final hurdle and it just doesn't happen. Justin Jefferson's got injured obviously in this game as well, but even up to that point it wasn't great, was it, Chris?
No, absolutely not. And say again, playing without a quarterback really has lost Pat the week.
And he didn't have an option on because obviously he's been rotating between Goff and Stroud, and both had bad matchups or not ideal situations, and both
there wasn't anywhere to go this week, so he went with the best of the bad bunch. And, he scored more, but just again for Pat, he's been carrying a few players. I think he's carried a player in the last 3, and this one he's carried a player and more with a -2 points from Matt Gay there.
I think this is. It wasn't that long ago that he had -1 from Riley Patterson. I'm pretty sure as well. It's crazy to have minus from.
It hasn't been good with kickers, generally speaking. But yeah, really the difference in the scoring is a quarterback, really, if we're honest. Otherwise, it looks a pretty grim read, and I'm not going to lie, 62 points is not a great score. But fair play to Mike, he's managed to keep battling somehow. Hopkins there doing him an absolute solid on Monday night. Mm-hmm. Barkley, despite it all, has done well as well this week. So yeah, it's not pretty, but it's effective, and it's got him across the line. But it should be really more how Pat's players have lost in the week rather than Mike's has won him, really, I would say, because yeah, as we've seen, there's been some good scorers in there. You look at Kamara and Olave particularly, been keeping them going over the last few weeks. But yeah, you can't come back to this game without saying, one, you can't carry a player at this time of the season, and two, your quarterback doesn't score more than 20 points, you're probably not going to win the week.
No, absolutely not. And we will just pivot to the bench, because I think in the preview after we did obviously on Friday, we kind of already said that the decision to play Najee Harris was a bit of an odd one, potentially over Zay Flowers. You put Zay Flowers in. Okay, to be fair to Pat, I think Matt Gay was actually a good streaming option last week. I mean, that -2 is shocking. We can just bring up what he's been doing lately here, if it's going to load. It's not going to load, of course it's not, but he's been a really, really solid kicking option all season long, and he just happens to have an absolute clanger at the worst time. But, you make those two things, and that is effectively the difference here. But you can't be too harsh on Pat with it, because, as you said, there are other parts of the game that have let him down, the quarterbacks and things as well. But no, just a gutting end to what has been a really good season for Pat, and that is the second straight year that we've had a night after never having one, having a 9-5 team miss the playoffs. It just shows you how competitive at the top, certainly, at least it was this season. So we'll go to the history of that matchup all time, bucking the trend on our 2-4 all time against Pakistan. So we'll go to the Around the League segment. No, we won't, because the recaps aren't ready on Tuesdays, so we don't even have that. So go and look at that when it's ready in your own time. So with that, then we will go on to the league news. Oh, but before I do the league news, I forgot to get this in. And that's not for Pat's unfortunate demise, that is because you failed in your lock of Pat. I did pick Pat, but yeah.
I bet my mortgage on Pat, and now I've got to pay it off double. So.
And you have no house to show for it. League news injury-wise, so we'll obviously just talk about injuries when it pertains to teams still in the playoff race. So we've got a few here, though. For a couple of the playoff teams, it was quite a bruising week. So we already saw it with Nico Collins with a calf issue leaving the game for detonators, and Jerome Ford injured his wrists. Bad enough that he had to have x-rays, but again, we're quite early in the week, so we don't really know the severity of these injuries at the moment, but I will throw it to you for analysis all the same, Chris, as to how potentially impactful these injuries could be for Ollie.
Yeah, I mean, entering a campaign like you're about to enter, you're going to the sharp end. You need everybody available, and it's just such harsh luck to not have that. To me, injuries this time of year sort of ruin the fun, don't they?
Yeah.
We had it one year, obviously, when Ben was the Corona Bowl from 2019. Where all of his players got injured in the final, and you think to yourself, well, that's just kind of, there's always going to be an asterisk over that one. So yeah, to get there's an achievement, but you want to push on a little bit, and certainly you want everybody to kind of have a fair crack, and it doesn't really feel that way, does it?
No. And this brings us on to the Dream Team, because Ollie's going straight to the Wildcard Bowl, being the points forward wildcard, as we said. Viv's got a bye, but his injuries arguably sting a little bit more, because Justin Herbert hasn't been playing great lately, but we obviously know what he's capable of. Josh Palmer was just coming back, and he was doing quite well when he at least had him. It was when he got injured as well that his play started to slip. But yeah, he fractured, I think, his index finger on his throwing hand, and it's already come out this evening that he will miss the rest of the season. And then you alluded to it as well in the recap there, that that Tyreek Hill had his ankle rolled up on. Now, I feel like every game for about the past 6 weeks, we've seen Tyreek Hill injure his ankle, leave momentarily, but then come back and play the rest of the game. So last night, he did not play a large portion of the game, came back in, but then did not come back in again. But how, I mean, as I say, Viv's got the bye, but how potentially impactful are these injuries for him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that rips the heart out of the team, really, doesn't it? I mean, certainly Tyreek, who's had a monster season. If he's not fit and able to play, at least 100%, even less than 100%, then it's a problem. But not having a quarterback going into a playoff round is difficult, especially one with the talent of Justin Herbert. Even though he's on a bad team, and that's not his fault, he's still got ability to get you across the line. So, yeah, it's disappointing. It's disappointing, I think, that that you have to then turn to the waivers, and there really isn't a lot there. I would even say that if there's any teams out there, myself included, to be honest, that are holding 2 QBs who don't need them, then do drop them at this point, because there's no reason why any team that's not in the playoffs should be holding quarterbacks at this time of the year.
Well, you guys, like I put up, I mean, you're still free to continue playing. We have the consolation brackets and things. I know it doesn't mean anything, but it's not like, the teams, I'm not in the playoffs, drop all my players. It's it's not one of those sort of, I get what you're saying, like in terms of forward, but I don't think you've got a couple, but like you're rotating and you're streaming. It's not as if you're like
when it comes to QBs, it's a bit different, I would say, because there's only a select few. If for players, I don't care. You get as many players as you like. As many skill positions as you want. You can defenses maybe even then. But I don't know. There's something about a QB that makes or breaks a week, and just to be a bit more competitive. I don't know. It's probably me trying to be sporting as sporting can be here. But
well, it's interesting because a lot of leagues a lot of leagues actually have rules that once the playoffs start, that any team that's not made the playoffs cannot make any transactions of any kind. They can't do any ads. They can't do any drops. Now, as I say, at the moment, it's probably something we want to talk about at the AGM, because we just have a kind of soft, don't claim anyone, but if you want to add drop and keep playing, you can. Like you say, that even can, in a way, have an effect. You can argue it either way. As you say, it's a continuity question, but also a sportsmanship question. So
absolutely. It's definitely one to talk about. But I would say that it's less of an issue for those in the consolation bracket who gives a flying fuck.
Yeah, we don't recognise the results of those. It's just if you want to play for fun, it's an extra game, isn't it? So yeah, that's those injuries. Obviously, we have no transactions to bring you, being Tuesday waiver day, but I thought instead of talking about the transactions that have happened, do you have any predictions for waivers here, Chris?
So I mean, pretty well, I know the full well that someone's going to go shopping for a quarterback.
Yeah. And we'll just bring out the quarterback options that were out there, because at the moment it's pretty much Matthew Stafford, and then you're looking at the likes of, I don't know why this is not ordering in the right way here, but it's the likes of Jake Browning, Joe Flacco were probably the most appealing ones, and then there's obviously a gaggle of other guys, Geno Smith maybe if he's back, and yes, so Viv obviously going to be going for one of them. Any other predictions?
Hard to predict, I think.
Understandable.
I don't really have any predictions, because I don't think any of the teams are, whatever they do, it's not going to add to the quality there.
Oh, Chris is back. Hello, Chris. Apologies about that. Dropped for a second. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So no, I was going to say that there's no one out there I can see anyway that you can think of and go, I have absolutely no idea why he's not on a roster.
Yeah, I've got one. Ben is going to spend $122 on Jaden Reed.
So he should. He should atone for his sins of dropping him last week.
He would have had a winning record if he didn't do that. So.
I'm playing Darius Slayton.
Yeah. Of all the people to pick up and play, why? I don't know where he got Darius Slayton from.
That is unusual. gamble, but unusual.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we all like Tommy DeVito, but not that much. Right, so we'll go to the standing stats and milestones now then. So we'll start off with the milestones as usual. Just the one for you this week, and it's poetic. The last of the founding teams that is still concurrently and obviously still playing. It's finally done it. Myself, I have achieved my 100th career win at long last. It's taken me a little longer than the rest of you, but I got there eventually. So,
unbelievable.
Yeah, all of the active continuous founding teams now have 100 career wins. Let's do the standings and the stats bit next. So, oops, we don't want to go on to that. We want to go back to this. So, final standings then, so of the regular season. So with the Southampton division, we have the number 1 overall seed in your goal, 10-4, the only team to get double-digit wins this year. So they get the bye, and they're also the now holder of the Nathwani rule for next year's draft. Pakistan and 9-5 right behind them, as we said, but yeah, they do not make the playoffs. Because obviously they didn't win the division. Same level as Great Scott that we can see there in the Portsmouth division at 9-5, but Pat has nearly 100 points less than him. And out goes the points forward wildcard, and Ollie has about 60 more points than Pat, so that is why Pat sat there at 9-5 and not in a seed. Forge Flyers and Tom's Torrents at 5-9 to round out the bottom of the division there. Portsmouth division, the Dream Team wins that at 9-5 ahead of Great Scott, as I say, 9-5 as well. Traditional wildcard, the difference in points there, Chris, 1,388.74 for Viv, 1,383.6 for Great Scott. 5.14 points was the difference between a division win and Jeff's maiden season.
Is that a make or a break there? That's the thing. I don't know. Will that 5 points be key?
Yeah, because you get the bye if you obviously win the division in this case. With Pat losing, so yeah, we'll have to see, and it obviously changes who you go on to play in week 16 as well, because the division winner, effectively the Portsmouth and the Winchester division winner would have played each other here, and obviously the Wildcard Bowl goes to see Ollie when they whoever emerges victorious from that. Ixab finishes at 7-7 there with that equal record, and then Ben is at the bottom there at 4-10. In the Winchester division, Gridiron Gang wins that at 9-5. They also ended up being the highest scoring team in the end. Badetne is at 8-6, and as I say, making the playoffs by way of the highest points forward among the non-seeded teams. Then we've got Ross's team at 5-9 and bucking the trend there at 4-10, which is actually a respectable finish, and we'll come on to that when we do the recaps, given where it was for a long time. So if we look at the overall here there, so let's take a look at the points forward next. So officially, actually, let's do playoff seed next. So officially, your God's the 1 seed, I'm the 2 seed, Viv is the 3 seed, and Jeff is the 4 seed, Badetna is the 5 seed. So this week we will have a rematch of Badetna's versus Great Scott straight away in the Wildcard Bowl. Viv will play me in week 16, and obviously the other week 16 game will be between Ollie and the winner of the Wildcard Bowl. In terms of points forward, so as I said, I am the highest scoring team. I nearly outscored the next highest team by 200 points. I had 1,570, and the next closest was Viv at 1,388. You can see there's a gaggle of teams, kind of the other playoff teams, really in the 1,300 mark there. And then, yeah, Pat just below, obviously did just miss out in terms of the points, was a bit lighter than the others there. And then again, the usual suspects there at the bottom. No one significantly behind in those terms there. Looking at the points against, the final tally of that, Mike did end up finishing as the highest conceded team. But to be honest, there's kind of 2 tiers of this, so you can kind of see here that Ross's team wasn't awfully far off from Mike at 1,380, and then you kind of have a middle of the tier that are all around the kind of the high 1,200, low 1,300 range. But then you've got this kind of bottom tier where Viv's kind of sitting in between at 1,244, but then, yeah, there were 3 teams with less than 1,200 points conceded. One of them is the playoff team, your Gold, right at the bottom with the least amount conceded, so obviously they did have some benefit there. Nearly, 250 points-ish, less conceded than Mike. Pat, despite having the second lowest, obviously couldn't capitalise on that in terms of a playoff berth, but obviously did benefit in terms of record. And then, yeah, Ben, obviously not one of the high scoring teams either, but finishing at 7-7, did have some fortune to have that 7-7 record. So yeah, in terms of overall ranks, We had 4, 9 and 5 teams overall, a 10 and 4 team, and then an 8 and 6 team, so quite a lot of wins there. And then at the bottom side of it, the bottom, a long time, Chris, for a long time, it looked pretty bleak that we'd have some really bad records. But actually, a couple of 4 and 10s, a few 5 and 9s, that's not really bad. We do typically kind of see that. Obviously, Mike managed to finish not standalone last there as well. There by rank, he's 12th, just on points with my dad, but not a bad finish there overall. Breakdown, I finished at the top of the breakdown rankings, so I had a 10 and 1 week last week, so that brings me to 121 and 33 for the season as a whole, which is a 30 hole more wins than over the next best, which is Great Scott finishing second in this metric actually, and I don't think they'd been that high for much of the year, so he finished 91 and 63 across the year. Ollie's literally right behind him at 1964, that's Ollie Bidet, that is. And again, the other couple of playoff teams, Vivs and Your Gold's 85 and 69, 79 and 75 is not far behind as well. I will just read into a couple of things that are interesting here though. So you can see Ollie's obviously been very boom or bust, having 10 and 1 weeks, 9 and 2 weeks, 1 week, and then 0-11s, 1 and 10s the others. Viv has been on a steady decline here. You can see, actually, it's been a really rough last 6 weeks for Viv, because outside of this week here where they went week 11, which was week 11, they've been 1 and 6, 6 and 5, 3 and 8, 5 and 6, and 3 and 8. So it has been a pretty dicey last 6 weeks for Viv. And Your Gold, kind of something similar over the last 3 weeks. Obviously, they had the eruption last week where they were obviously 11 and 0, but that's bookended by a 1 and 10 week and a 2 and 9 week. Before that, they weren't too bad, but it's been quite sporty of late. And then talking about slow finishes, Pakistan, what was that? Weeks 9 and weeks 10. Pat was 9 and 2 and 10 and 1 across the week. And then the final 4 weeks, 0 and 1, 6 and 5, 4 and 7, and 0 and 11 again. So 2 0 and 11 weeks in the final 4 weeks is obviously kind of led to Pat's demise a bit, unfortunately, here. Then all the other teams expectedly kind of at the lower half of this metric. Ben, bizarrely, even though being 7-7, finished bottom of this at 58 and 96, Chris.
Plenty of luck all year then, eh, with that. That's done well.
Absolutely, yeah. The stat hides nothing. So, Tommy managed to obviously just finish ahead there, but obviously they were saved a bit by the nice 8 and 3 week. At the end, you're obviously near the bottom there. You're actually level with Mike as well, interestingly enough.
Yes, that's nice.
Yeah, a testament to how shat on Mike was, as we all know. Then we look at the coach rankings. So Ross finishes the top. Ross did not concede. Ross did not leave 100 points on his bench this year. He just kept it under at 98. So good coaching job there by Ross. Your Gold's in second. There you can see I'm in third with that 20-point week last week and the week before actually. Then again, you've got some of the other kind of teams here in the middle ground. But you'll be pleased to hear, Chris. Just talking about points, we talked about those 5-point difference between the Dream Team and Great Scott. Great Scott left about 23 more points than Dream Team on his bench, so could have done with some of those. Obviously, at some point, came down to that. And again, Pakistan as well. We talk about, being, I think it was about 70 points short. Leaves 199 points on the bench as well. So there's some meat on the bone there that you could have potentially clawed back. But at the bottom, Chris, you'll be very pleased to hear you finished with a perfect 0-point week last week. Not only that, Tom didn't want to leave you on your own, so he's obviously been dropping points left, right, and centre to join you nearer the bottom here. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. So it really has been a tale of 2 halves of the year for me. So,
I mean, you've been pretty elite in this metric over the last 4 weeks. You've only conceded about not even 25 points across the 4 weeks, whereas before that you were averaging 20 points a week. Hey, you can carry that momentum into the next season.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Then we'll just take a look at the accolades, because obviously with the regular season in the books, we can start notching up the playoff appearances and obviously the regular season championship and stuff like that. So we'll just take a look at this. So in terms of playoff appearances, Ollie, Coach Badet's making his 6th playoff appearance now. 2 years in a row for him. Jeff's obviously in his debut season made a maiden playoff appearance. Ollie Gardner is making his 2nd playoff appearance. Viv is making his record-tying 7th playoff appearance, and Viv's career record with this is quite funny, because you can see here basically every other year it kind of averages out every other year. Viv makes the playoffs, so he's up it 1 year and he's down the other basically. So bet on Viv not to make the playoffs next year, but have a good year after that. Yeah. I'm making the playoffs for the 6th time as well. My 2nd in a row as well, like Ollie, and those are the playoff appearances. Regular season championship, obviously Ollie Garner won that. That is his first career regular season championship. So congrats to you for that. It's also his 2nd division win. Last time he made the playoffs, he won the division in 2020 there as well. Also the best record of his career. We'll just pivot on to this one here. Where is you are gold? I think they're the one. Yeah, you can see after going 4-10 in 2022, they right the ship and go 10-4 in 2023. So look at that. You like to see that.
Huge. Look at that. What's
yeah.
Comeback team here.
Oh yeah. Comeback. I hope I notched his name down for the comeback award. I'm pretty sure I did. So that's Ollie. Viv. So Viv won his 5th division this year, and that is a new LOC record. The record was previously tied at 4. So with that, yeah, obviously Viv is the now proud owner of the most division wins in LOC history. I got my 2nd division win as well, again after getting it last year. So back-to-back division wins for me, which I was actually quite surprised. It's happened quite a few times in LOC history. I was just taking a look through. There's been a fair number of teams that have won divisions back-to-back. This was my 3rd highest scoring team of the season, though, and it's funny, the highest scoring team, because the only only teams to have won this that are active have won it multiple times. There is no singular high-scoring team for a coach among active coaches. All of them have won it multiple times, which is just a little bit of an oddity. And I don't, I think there is one all the time, and Nigel's the only other one. Other than that, it's all been multiple winners of this. So you're in an exclusive club if you've had the high-scoring team of the season, and I'm in an even rarer club because I am the only team ever to have a highest-scoring team in back-to-back seasons. So that's never been done before. And also my score of 1,570 will pivot back onto the website. Did I have the history? I can just bring up. So my highest scoring team this year is the highest scoring team we've had since 2018 when Tom was 1,642, but 2019 marked the start of the new Megaflex era that we now live in. So I have had the highest scoring team in the Megaflex era. So that's me. Then what else have we got here? I think, that was it for all the standings and stats there and everything. Yeah, because all the other ones are to do with the awards and things like that. So obviously we'll come back to those later on. So that's that for that. With that then, we will go on to Debate Corner. For that we need John. Where are you, John? Order. Thank you, John. He's getting ready for the Christmas holidays as well. He's just got to vote on the Rwanda thing, and then he's off to buy his Christmas tree, Chris. So.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be a difficult one. Difficult vote, that one. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. But the Debate Corner this week, Chris, significantly easier than the Rwanda migrant issue, is, as I said earlier, we've seen now 2 years in a row a 9-5 team not make the playoffs. We'd never seen a 9-5 team not make the playoffs before, and obviously over the last 2 seasons we've had we've added a playoff spot, so it makes it even more bizarre that a 9-5 team hasn't made it for the first time 2 years straight. My question to you is a simple one though, Chris, is will we see a 9-5 team not make the playoffs again next year?
Well, you got to get to 9-5 first, which is hard work.
It is.
It's not easy to get.
Okay, I'll rephrase. Will a 9-5 or better team not make the playoffs? That's
probably not. I think that next season there might be a bit more parity in the midfield. So there won't be that sort of 6 and 6, I suppose.
We didn't have a single 6 and 8 team this year. It was usually quite a common one.
And that's unusual. So to have quite as many teams being pumped as they have. And to have not be around the 500 record, it tells you a lot about where the disparity was in terms of players this year. I think running backs generally were pretty overvalued and didn't necessarily get the value back. I think certain receivers were the absolute key this year and still remain so. And that's why you see certain teams do well at the detriment of ones that possibly take a different approach. Mm-hmm. So no, I think it would be very difficult to see a 9-5 team not make the playoffs next year. I think that people might get wise to that. It's been a very defensive league in real life this year, which has affected scoring, no doubt. And just say key injuries in key times, it hasn't been but a lot of consistency. It's for certain teams. So I think we'll see. At least I hope we see a bit more of a trailing pack next year rather than this. The definite league split.
The playoff race, I would say, was still interesting because it was quite competitive between the teams that were in it. But like you say, it was jostling for position race as opposed to who's going to make it race, which is obviously more what we want to see, and obviously a bit more exciting certainly for everyone else. I tend to agree with what you're saying as well. Cool, that's it for Debate Corner Line. So we will go on to the preview, not previews this week because with the three division winners getting a bye, we have the Wildcard Bowl between the two wildcard teams. Now it did look like it was quite possible that we would be enacting the new wildcard rule that was brought in last year, which if the wildcard team had one clear win over a division team, they would avoid the Wildcard Bowl. But obviously with Pat losing, that was not, and me winning, that was no longer possible. We see Great Scott against the Detonators. Just before we go into the preview, Chris, I said last week, given it's only the one game, up to you. We can do locks this week if we want to officially do a lock. Should we make it a locks?
Let's do it.
Cool.
Why
All right then, so we'll go, and obviously this is the only game, so it's obviously the marquee matchup. But why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't it be? It's marquee. It's the Wildcard Bowl. So here we go, marquee matchup for Week 15, the Wildcard Bowl. The playoffs are here, the Wildcard Bowl is here, and we've got two teams who were very familiar with each other because they just played each other last week. Great Scott versus the Detonators. Great Scott took that one, getting the traditional wildcard, but with Pastime's loss, the Detonators fell into the points forward wildcard, and he'll get a shot at redemption here, and redemption, the NFL.com fantasy predictions say he will get, as they're projected to win, 89-84. Let's take a look at the lineups. Any changes so far? Yeah, we have got a few here. Ezekiel Elliott moves into the starting lineup for the Detonators in favour of Nico Collins. So at the moment, Ollie's going with 30 personnel, 3 running backs, 2 wide receivers. On the other side of the board for Great Scott, he is unchanged at the moment, so he's going with the 30 personnel, 3 running backs and 2 wide receivers. The history of this match was obviously 1-0 because it was the first time they played each other last week in favour of Great Scott. Now there may be obviously some changes, as we know, with waivers running tomorrow morning. But as you kind of said, Chris, probably not anything too significantly different with the teams. So go ahead and tell me what you think of this year's Wildcard Bowl.
Oh, Great Scott must be looking at this and going, what did I do to deserve these matchups this week? Oh, so yeah, key players in key games. That's what we talk about all the time on this podcast. Well, look at this: Chase, St. Brown, Mostert, Gibbs, Achan. Oh, jeez.
All playing Minnesota, Denver, or the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. All at home. I will grant you. If there's one thing, it's all at home. But there's some. If you want matchup city, they're horrendous.
I would say that the Jets' run defense is not the strength of that defense, so that isn't necessarily. It looks on paper a bit more, because you think about the Jets' team, the run defense is not necessarily the strength of that defense. And Denver suck on the ground as well across the breadth of the season. They've been better lately, but go on.
Yeah, that may be, but even so, that's it. I mean, I think that if you're going to pick one or the other, and you're going to try and run on the Jets, maybe that's the way to go. But yeah, it's definitely a high tier defense, and yeah, Packers versus Tampa down there on D. It's all right. It's not great, but it's all right. So we saw what.
I'd imagine he'd move off of that.
You would think so if it's a better option, but it's not evident at the moment. No. Again, justice for Rashad White on the bench there. I'd give him a go.
Against Green Bay, he's got to come in.
But I wouldn't change the quarterback though. So Lawrence against Bolton, brutal.
But Wilson against Detroit, because Detroit hemorrhage. They suck on D at the moment. So
yeah, so it's well worth it. So I think that's probably the shining light. Whilst on the other side, it's a very mixed bag for Ollie, as his team is, to be fair. But have you got guys who you think, do you trust them week in, week out? Do you trust Devontae Adams at the moment in that offense?
No.
Do you trust Jalen Hurts going across the country and playing in Seattle? Do you trust Ezekiel Elliott to actually commit to score any points against KC, who, by the way, are going to be coming out fired and angry after last week, let's be honest. And they're going to blow the Patriots away. You can just see it now. Jerome Ford is questionable, genuinely questionable.
Yeah.
I think Kyron Williams will have a good day. Justin Tucker and the Chiefs D are all good down the bottom there. But there's certainly question marks that arise over those guys. And yeah, we looked at the bench there. Is Nico Collins going to be fit? But even if he is fit, playing Tennessee, who put up a great fight. Can I just say, last night was absolute. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and had to watch the fourth quarter because I couldn't believe my eyes.
I don't know how I was watching that game earlier. I knew the score, and it was like 13-0 going into the fourth, and then Miami scored 2 touchdowns. I was like, and there's like 5 minutes left. I was like, how the hell did Tennessee win this game?
Do not know, but you know what? There's signs of life in the Tennessee Titans at last. There probably won't be next week, though. That's why Nico Collins might play. Look, this is a really tough game to predict.
Well, he might not have CJ Stroud either. Even if he does so, don't forget, he's got a concussion. It's probably going to be Davis Mills.
No, Davis Mills doesn't suck much. He can see over the centre, mate. I think this is a really hard one to call. I think that Ollie's got a ragtag bunch that have done really well to get to this point. Yeah. And he somehow resurrected them. But we saw last week, if Jalen Hurts gets shut down, then things don't tend to go particularly well. And I see that may happen. I think that Zeke might not be a factor this week. And Devontae Adams is a weird one on a Thursday night game. Just you want to stay well away from that. But on the other side, you can't turn on the fact that that Denver D is tricky. But if you're Detroit, I think you give them a go at home. I think they give anyone a go at home at the moment. And as you said, though the Jets are definitely a top 5 defense in the league, Miami have got enough on the ground to get through. So I think Great Scott are probably going to win this game. As it stands, I like them more because they've got a bit more of an accomplished lineup than the Detonators do. So I think as a result of that, I'm going to have to lock them, of course. Great Scott to carry on their great form.
What an enthusiastic and concrete lock that was, Chris. But no, if it helps you, if it makes you feel any better, I'm also locking Great Scott because I'm forced to. No, but no, I agree. The matchups are worse, but I actually missed it in the recap that what I wanted to say with Ollie's team is we actually been talking about since Kyron Williams' return. It's changed Bennett's fortune a little bit, and it made us look at this team a little bit differently. But then after last week's game, again, I think you look at it, it does just feel a bit meh again, and it's really weird that the shine is just kind of worn off so quickly. Now, Elliott, with the amount of touches he's going to get, as you say, does help with that potentially. But like you say, we don't know what Ford we're going to get, and then some of the other options that you just don't know. And if Hurts doesn't deliver, the reason I'm going to lock Scott is the reason I think Ollie's going to do better this week as well, and Jalen Hurts is going to do better, because it's very rare you see good teams and good players have bad weeks 2 weeks in a row. They come out fine. I think Hurts and the Eagles, they've just been slapped twice now by the Niners and the Cowboys. And the Seahawks team, especially if they still don't have Geno, but even if they do, I'm not really sure it makes that much difference. They're going to be able to put out a statement and say, we're still the Eagles. And for that reason, despite some of the tough matchups for Great Scott, I think they're going to be doing the same thing. Because you look at the Lions guys, yes, Denver, fairly good defense, a bit softer on the ground. Obviously, they've been a team that's been playing up. But the Lions, again, they've been a really inconsistent, weird team that, they look really, really great one week and then they get absolutely bitched by a team the next week. You got to think, being back at home, they've got to show something here. If they get Frank Ragnow back and their own line gets a bit better, that's going to help as well. Same thing with the Dolphins. They just, as you were just saying, they just lost to Tennessee in really embarrassing fashion for a team that's arguably vying for the number 1 seed in the AFC. They absolutely punked the Jets on Black Friday a few weeks ago. They're at home now, so they're going to be very much looking at a statement there. You don't have that narrative with the other guys like Chase and Wilson there, but you get my point. So, but the reason I'm going to go with Great Scott is because he has more of those players than Bedetonators do, I think, and I think that's going to result in some overcoming of the tough matchups here and just good players and good teams delivering on that performance, and that's why I think Great Scott will win this one. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for sure, and it will be interesting to see what other moves Ollie particularly might make, because yeah, he has a bit more license to wheel and deal with the free agency and maybe plug and play some guys into his lineup, so it'll be interesting to see who he goes for there. So that is all for the previews this week. So like I say, we're going to do a little bit of a recap session now. We're going to split these for the teams that didn't make the playoffs across the 2 weeks, and then obviously as teams get eliminated from the playoffs, we'll do theirs in the same episode. So we'll go bottom to top. So if we go back to the standings here, they are over here. We'll start off with bucking the trend, because they were obviously the last place team. So what I will do, Chris, is I'll just run down some stuff. And then we'll have a little bit of a chat about each of these teams' seasons. So yeah, starting off with Mike's, if we look at their season as a whole here, so what's back in the trend here. So yeah, 4-10 this year. They did the reverse Ollie Gardner-Beddoes. They were 10-4 last year, go 4-10 this year. So in that regard, a bit disappointing. And actually, it's Mike's worst season of the year. The narrative for Mike for the first 3 years of his career, it was basically Team 500, and then he jumped above that last season, and he completely negated that again this season. So yeah, drafted in a very similar spot there as well. Let's take a look at his draft class here. So he obviously started at the top, fairly running back heavy with Barkley and Josh Jacobs, obviously 2 guys that were a large proponent of that 10-4 season. Picked up guys like Devontae Smith, Hopkins, Chris Godwin too, are all still on the team. Michael Pittman as well. Didn't really get much from the bottom side of the draft, but you can't really dig into Mike too much for that. And then again, if we look at the final team as well, like I say, all of those guys actually started for him last week as well. And then he's obviously picked up, hasn't really picked up anyone along the way of any particular note, I would say. And I was just looking at his transactions earlier. He only made 9 roster moves across the season, which I don't know what he did last year, but typically he's fairly busy and does a good job of adding guys. His biggest outlay was KJ Osborne, who he spent $40 on, and he probably got maybe 40 points push back from him. But he had some pretty big swings and misses. You can see 20 points on Matt Breda. That was obviously when Barkley got injured. Josh Reynolds for 14 points. Cam Akers for 7. But just nothing really quite stuck in that regard. So he obviously couldn't really inject too much life into the team. As we know, a large part of his season was the high amount of points against, because the points forward, he really wasn't too far off the pace there. And then looking in terms of his schedule, that's really plain to see. Through the first 5 weeks of the season, he conceded no less than 109 points a week. Didn't help that he himself didn't go over 100 points in a single week, but his start, you can see here, all but 1 week, he basically got around or above 90 points in that span. Then when the buys started coming along, that's when the wheels started to come falling off a little bit. He obviously dropped a couple of games there that he could have potentially won with a better score. He did have a bit of a better run down the stretch, but even again, you can see there was just a bit of inconsistency in there for Mike as well. Any comments or anything you want to mention about Mike's season, Chris?
Yeah, I just think it's pretty morale sapping, especially over the first 4 or 5 weeks. Just get absolutely caned, and then have no way back. In fact, I wouldn't even go as far as saying it's the 4 or 5. I mean, probably 7 or 8 weeks of the season.
I didn't pick up on this. Sorry, yeah. So he started 0-7, well on his way to potentially the worst season in OC's history. I think I started 0-9 one year and managed to finish 3-11. He picked up that win in week 8, but then again proceeded to drop the next couple. So entering week 11 at 1-9. Potentially on course for the work. But then he goes and picks up 3 out of 4 in the final 4 games.
Yeah, and that's the strange thing about this season, is that for certain teams it really has been like key players got to the bye and then they've got themselves right and turned up in the last bit of the season. or at least certain teams have got themselves sorted out. I don't know what it is, but yes, that's certainly the case here, and I can understand why there's a low amount of roster moves. I think after that sort of start, there's no way you can win. So yeah, just got to put together the best team you can and crack on, I suppose.
Indeed, yeah. So he made 3 of his moves he made in week 3. All of Matt Brady, Josh Reynolds and Cam Akers. Then he went for KJ Osborne in week 6. It's probably the turning point. If that hits and it maybe helps him a little bit, maybe he keeps going, but obviously didn't have the impact. And as you say, after that point, nothing more really than kickers, defenses, and picking up 8 over Mayfield. Other than Romeo Dobbs in week 13, of course, who helped him onto a win, I believe. Anyway, so that's it for Mike's season. Next, we'll talk about my dad's season. So if we take a look at his overall history on the old almanac here, so 4-10 season for my dad, which actually is a career worst. I hadn't picked up on that. So my dad's had a couple of 5-9 seasons across the tenured 15-year career, but never had anything worse than 5-9. So yeah, first time he's had a 4-10 record, drafting from the 6th spot, which again he's in the middle of the pack before, and he's had some decent seasons, so can't read too much into that necessarily. Looking at the draft class, let's go on to bare necessities here. So we start off the top with Bijan, Joe Mixon, Lamar Jackson, Debo, TJ Hawkinson, Javonte Williams in the 6th round. So again, much like Mike's team, that core has remained intact all season long. And again, Debo's obviously had a little bit of injury issues. Lamar's been very up and down, but by and large, they've all been there. Marquise Brown, he's a guy that's still on the roster as well. And again, not really too much from the bottom end, but not surprising. So the core itself was pretty good. But the story of my dad's season, and we'll take a look at the final team here as well, because he did have a couple of good additions along the way. Bless you. In Gus Edwards and Puka Nacua particularly, if we go on to the ads here. My dad only made 5 roster moves across the season, but 2 of them were Puka Nacua and Gus Edwards, so that's a 40% smash rate, I think you can call that. And they came all the way back in week 2, obviously concluding of week 1. $25 to $16, which I think certainly with hindsight is an absolute steal for both of those players. But we know the story of my dad's team, that it was just that the team didn't get the management it needed, that it wasn't necessarily being changed, wasn't covering guys for bye weeks or continuing to make the adds and the drops. You can see here, starting off 3-1, had the rough week 1 where they lost in a gritty low score against Pat, but then the next 3 weeks proceeded to score basically 100 or more, pick up those wins, and then that's just where it completely fell off. Didn't top 80 points from weeks 5 to weeks 10. And like I say, that's a combination of not necessarily changing the team, or not changing the team, not necessarily covering the bye weeks. The scoring did get better down the stretch, but they were just getting outscored, and again, obviously the team change didn't happen. Then absolutely out of nowhere, obviously, as we know, week 14 against you, Chris, goes and scores 130 points.
Yeah, out of nowhere, but it's no finesse in that at all. There are some pretty heartbreaking losses in there. So that is for sure. But yeah, it hasn't been a vintage team from bare necessity this year. I think again went with similar strategies. Both his running backs there, Bijan and Mixon, were pretty inconsistent throughout most of the trunk of the year. I think you would say certainly Bijan didn't really live up to the draft pick. He's not been, I wouldn't go far as saying he's been a bust, but I don't think he was worth that first rounder. You're right, and he looked every bit of that, to be fair.
Oh yeah.
You're right. I think it's just.
I was going to say, that's not on my dad, by the way. That's completely on Arthur Smith. So.
Yeah, and Lamar. I thought Lamar would have this crazy year after the contract, and I just don't think that he's quite again lived up to the.
I was looking at this. It's bizarre because I'm pretty sure here. Can we sort by the all ball players here? I'm pretty sure he's the 5th overall quarterback in terms of scoring. It's come in peaks and waves, but my dad's not been changing his team. So, but like you say, you have the heartbreaking losses in there. No doubt the lower scoring weeks will probably be coinciding with when Lamar had his down weeks, and obviously the better ones when he has his up weeks. So that does play into it. To be fair to what you're saying, yeah. Continue.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. As Lamar might be the fifth highest scorer in QB, but I think in terms of consistent point scoring, just hasn't quite been there. And that's what you really want from your quarterback, is a solid foundation in which to build every week. I don't think that team's a bad team on paper. I just think that it's just been wildly inconsistent with its with how it's scored its points.
Yeah.
And that's the down for it. Because clearly, as he showed this week or last week, it's a good team.
Yeah, indeed. I meant to say in Dream Team's recap as well, talking about overall rankings. Dream Team, Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb are the number 1 receiver and the number 2 receiver. So not often you see one
good
team.
draft there.
Yeah, tell me about it. So on to the next team then. So next up we've got Tom's Tyrants. So let's take a look at their all-time almanac. Obviously another founding team. So across their 15-year tenure, 5-9 is not the worst record they've ever had, but not far off. They did 4-12 the year before. It's actually been not a great run for Tom's Tyrants. You can see here. So 5-9 this year, 4-12 last year, 5-9 the year before that, 7-7 2020, 6-8 2019. But the last time they had a winning season was all the way back in 2018. When they were 10-4. I'm trying to remember. That was the year that he won his second title, I think, wasn't it? Oh, we've got the almanac open. We can just check here. Corona Bowl 8. Is that right? No, that's not right, is it? That would have been 2016 or something like that. But is that right? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, it was Corona Bowl 6, sorry, that he won in 2014. Yeah. So last time he had a winning season was 2018, though. And actually, again, you strip it back further, that's the only winning season he's had since 2014. So it's really been a long cold period for Tom's Tyrants since that second Corona Bowl, really, in 2014. Looking at the draft class for Tom, let's get on to it here. So started off with Cooper Kupp, which I think at the very start of the season I thought was quite a dubious, before the season even started when we did the draft recap, I thought was quite a dubious pick, given that he was coming into the season with the injury. Garrett Wilson second, which obviously, got completely blown up from the get-go, because obviously in the first week of the season, nearly on the first snap of the season, Aaron Rodgers obviously tore his Achilles. Joe Burrow, obviously again another guy coming into the year a bit injured with that calf issue. Got into a good patch of form, but then again obviously suffered that season-ending wrist injury. Keenan Allen's obviously been an absolute revelation. So again another one of these teams where the first 6 picks, if you exclude injury, are okay, but obviously Tom's been bitten by injury, some self-inflicted you would say and some not. Drake London's obviously not necessarily been the best, with the very inconsistent quarterback play down there in Atlanta. James Cook as well has been a guy that's been a bit inconsistent. Brian Robinson, a very good draft pick in pick 8 for I think he must be, in terms of points, an RB1 still across the season. And then again, like the other teams, nothing across the bottom here. Just before we go on, what did you make of Tom's Tyrants draft class in hindsight, Chris?
Yeah, I definitely don't need to do the old draft recap anymore. I think you're right. When it comes to either bad luck or bad picks, Kupp in the first round was very dubious. I think picking any injured player like that so early when he's going to miss weeks, I'm surprised that his value held there. But yeah, Garrett Wilson obviously would have been a much better pick had he had most of the year. Drake London down there. So again, got caned by the bad offense in Atlanta and bad QB play. James Cook hasn't been as consistent as perhaps you'd want in Buffalo. Pickens again, bad QB. So yeah, it's a story of bad offenses really. I think this is the theme is what we're going to see is waiver pickups over the course of the year for genuine quality. There wasn't that many players this year that you could bid on, and I think that you were stuck by and large with the guys that you drafted for the most part of the season, because no one else out of the waivers, apart from a handful of players, really came to the fore this year.
Yeah, no, so Tom's very first waiver pickup, in fact, which week 1 he must have done even before the season started, was Adam Thielen, who has actually been a fairly serviceable player for Tom, but again, with that being such a poor offense as well, he's not necessarily been completely reliable. Tom has been a bit more active than the other two teams that we've seen there, but just to go back to what you were saying, there's not really any impact player of any note in there. He obviously added Amari DiMercado after he had that decent week there back in week 6, but that was obviously very, very short-lived. Beyond that, nothing else really too particularly impactful there for Tom. If we look at the schedule as a whole, so yeah, it was just a bit of a slow start really. In the first 5 weeks of the season, only topped 76 points once, and he got 127 points in week 2, but outside of that was very, very skinny, but somehow was 2 and 3 after that. Then had a good week in week 6, but just got outscored. But then after that, you can see that from week 7 onwards, he would only go on to have one more week over 84 points, and you can actually strip that off even further, because that 84 came in week 14. Take that way, he actually only had 2 games from week 7 onwards where he scored over 80 points at all. So it was a very, very dry run to the end of the year, and just kind of say, Chris, injuries and just lack of an impact from the waiver wire across that span. Obviously, he was kind of in the mix to start the year, but then it absolutely just fell away as the season went on, just as the team got injured, or some guys that started well for him like Keenan Allen and Brian Robinson, they had a bit of cold spells here and there. And obviously you had the injuries start to happen with Joe Burrow and everything like that as well. So, rough year for Tom, but we'll see what he comes back with next year. Then, last one we'll do today. As I said, we'll split these over the couple of episodes, the few episodes we've got left. Your team, Chris. So you are the 9th ranked team here, so we'll go with you. So you finished 5-9 on the year this year, so let's take a look back. Slightly worse than the year before you were 6-8. Obviously, you did win it in 2021, where you went 12-2, and before that was obviously a very, very good run. So it's 5-9 is your worst record since 2015, actually. And obviously, you had some very, very rough years there, as I did around the similar kind of time span. Yeah. So 5-9, by the book, does rank as your 3rd worst season by wins, but it's not too significantly different to a 6-8 season, of which you've had a few off there as well. Looking at your draft recap. Let's bring that up here. So, obviously you led up the top quite running back heavy. Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, again, I don't think I'd class those guys as busts. They weren't obviously necessarily the best, but they certainly, didn't completely falter. But that's when it does get a bit more iffy, because Dameon Pierce in the 3rd round does jump out as obviously one that didn't hit. Calvin Ridley has been a guy as well. He's been very inconsistent. He's turned it on a bit more of late, but for much of the season, he obviously wasn't there for you when you needed him. I would say that Brandon Ayuk's obviously been a very, very good draft pick for you. I think he's one of the top 12 scoring wide receivers this year. Tyler Lockett, again, is a guy that's filled in for you quite nicely. Nothing else really beyond that, but the story maybe is the one at the very bottom here, Anthony Richardson. A story of, actually, it's 2, and they both revolve around quarterbacks. Dak Prescott and Anthony Richardson. What could have been, because Prescott didn't start well and you dropped him, which I don't think was a crazy decision at the time, given how he did start. It's funny to think now with how well he's playing, how many points he's putting up, but that certainly wasn't the case to begin the year. And then Anthony Richardson obviously did start the year very well, as we fondly remember, just couldn't stay healthy, and then obviously eventually did suffer a season-ending injury, and that kind of ultimately, I think, probably scuppered your season there and then, didn't it, Chris?
Unfortunately so, yeah. When it all in Anthony Richardson, I thought he was the real deal, and there was no reason to suggest in September that he wasn't, because for me he was absolutely electric. But yes, unfortunately, that was I dropped Dak Prescott earlier in the season, because you're right, his first 3 or 4 weeks were very slow, but his remaining weeks were excellent. Unfortunately for me. Yes, I ended up on the QB carousel with Kirk Cousins and Sam Howell and Kyler Murray of late, and Minshew last week. So it's been a bit inconsistent. But as you quite rightly say, I think that having my 3rd round pick, obviously Dameon Pierce didn't work out. He's been injured most of the year. That wasn't great. It took Ramondre Stevenson a long time to get going until they realised that actually running the ball was probably the way to go. Ridley's been wildly inconsistent, but I think that in recent times he showed flashes of what he was probably put there to do. But I do think with NFL teams, you think to yourself, when you watch the games, so they don't tend to play to their strengths a lot of the time. I don't really know why that is. I don't know whether that's just because they kid themselves into not doing that, or they're trying to think about things too deeply. I don't really know. But it's almost a surprise when guys who they bring in to be playmakers, they're put in a position to make plays, and then they do.
It's an odd one because, particularly with the Jags here, I mean, as we saw with Trevor Lawrence, as we were kind of saying for a lot of the season for Great Scott, he wasn't a guy that was costing Jeff, but he wasn't a guy that was going out there and actually earning him wins or anything. He was kind of there. He was chipping in his 16 to 20 points a week quite merrily, but not really doing anything above or beneath that. And obviously read between the line that's fantasy terms, but in real NFL terms, that means Trevor Lawrence, he's only throwing for maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns a game. He's not getting a great deal of yardage. That kind of suggests, like you say, he's not playing particularly well, or they're not necessarily using him or running the offense in quite the right way. Last 2 weeks we've seen Lawrence play a lot better, and as you say, they have kind of done a few things differently with him, getting him moving a bit more and things like that. So I think that really with Ridley, I think Ridley's been fine. I think it's more the play of Trevor Lawrence, as you say, maybe how they've run that offense is what has held him back, as opposed to how they've deployed Calvin Ridley himself. And of course, best friend Zay Jones missed a lot of the season because he fucking loves playing with Zay Jones. So
that's true. The stats don't lie as well. Leaving 200 points on the bench over the course of the year. Yeah. Is unhelpful. I grant that some of those are callback scores, but there are some that aren't, and there are some players that have been on the team and you bring off the waivers and don't have the balls to play them, and yet they score massive points. So there's that factor as well. But yeah, I think I genuinely think after this year, though, in the Superflex format, I think that going for 3 running backs is no longer the primary option. I don't think that there's enough backs in the league that can sustain that anymore towards the top end of the draft. And I think that as a receiving league, you're much better off, I think anyway, to possibly go for one of the key running backs in the first round. But if there's not there, then there's so many receivers over the course of the year that you can take, or running backs that come out of nowhere you can pick up off the waivers. That possibly that that structure's dead.
You've hit on it right there, because I would disagree a bit. I think the 3 RB equivocally, if you have 3 running backs in your team in a given week, 3 of the best running backs against 3 of the best receivers, let's say, I think the 3 running backs would win more often than not. But you've kind of hit on the crux of the issue there, is when you're taking the running backs at the top of the draft, and this is kind of something that I picked on up a bit in my draft strategy this year to peek behind the curtain, is because those guys absolutely must hit and must be really good, because if they don't, you're kind of giving up value elsewhere of not getting those elite receivers, because as we all know, injuries, running backs are the most injury prone position in the NFL, and a lot of receivers have got injured this year as well, but typically running backs are very injury prone. They're more prone for their play to drop off because obviously they age a lot quicker. They are also fairly dependent on other things around them, like how good the O-line is for run blocking and things like that. There are a lot of different things to go into a running. If you can get maybe one of the top guys, and then in the draft later on find those gems that beat their ADP and raise their value. I think looking at my team this year is not to toot the horn too much, but guys like David Montgomery and Isaiah Pacheco, who I picked up in round 6 and round 7, have both been effectively or nearly RB1s, RB2s. If you can do that or find them off the free agency, like you say, that's absolutely the key. But yeah, what you did, as you've kind of correctly analysed, is you went Henry, Stevenson, and Pierce. Henry and Stevenson have been okay, but I don't think that you'd be the first. I don't think they've been game changers for your team, and obviously Pierce busted entirely.
I will say this: I had reservations at the beginning of the season that Henry wouldn't find his form.
Yeah.
And for most part of the season, this may be the last year that he
sure.
well, which is sad.
Yes.
But yeah, to have had him this season of all seasons, I think has been good, because at least there's always been someone to hang your hat on.
Yeah.
Somebody to be able to make a play, even when other players around him haven't been doing it.
You said that he has had some games though, like he's had 2.6. He's had a lot of good games as well. Yeah.
Because the Titans got beat on early part of the season.
Yeah.
When they didn't have he was getting beat on because they didn't have a QB or at least a functional one.
Yeah.
And he was the only real offense. But look, as a Titans fan, you got to have him. And it breaks my heart to know that he's not going to be there, or possibly not going to be there next season, most likely. So yeah, but there you are. That's the story of the season. Is the strategy was wrong from the start. Identifying that early for next year is the key thing. So you got to learn from it.
Exactly, yeah, learning from mistakes. You had a trade along the way as well. So you traded for Kareem Hunt. Giving away a Tyler Lockett to me. We were kind of chatting about that on Sunday as well. It's been probably about net equal in reality, but hey, you got a trade in at least. And then going through your additions throughout the year, in terms of a lot of impactful additions, let's take a look here. No one really in the initial stance of the season. You picked up Sam Howell for $13 in week 7. I'd say he's been fairly solid for you. You also picked up Kirk Cousins for $20 in week 8, but obviously got injured. Otherwise would have been fine for you. Miles Sanders, $15. he didn't really pay off there, but I understand at the time. I remember he was a starting running back, obviously, and you take the volume and things like that. Kendrick Bourne for $8 in week 8. Obviously, again, he was a guy that was doing okay but got injured. Kyler Murray for $15 in week 9. Again, that was a solid one. Actually, you got Sam Howell back in week 9 as well, but that would have made sense because obviously Cousins would have been injured by that point as well. And then again down the stretch, kind of like you say, you just couldn't really find anyone that particularly stuck and provided anything more than a bit of ad hoc value here and there. But and then looking at the schedule from a schedule perspective, you started off the season fairly good actually. First couple of weeks, 100, 103, 90 points, but you just unfortunately got outscored both of those weeks. Then you had the letdown game in week 3, and ironically in the more winnable game. Finally got the first win on the board in week 4 there, at 1 point, very narrow win, part of the reason Pat missed the playoffs, you could say, in week 4 there over Pat Stan. Then again, it kind of went back to, you dropped an eminently winnable game there in week 5, just about scraped through against Mike in week 6, but then you had just this cold stretch here, which was kind of, obviously you were at 2 and 5 at that point, so it's not 2 and 4 at that point, so it's not the end of the road, but it's obviously a bit of an uphill climb. But then you can see over the next 4 weeks there, 3 weeks in the 70s and then 1 in the 50s, and in all but one of those weeks you conceded basically 100 points or more as well. So that was obviously the kind of nail in the coffin of the season. But then you had that nice finish. You went 3-1 over the final 4 weeks of the season, and in 2 of those weeks you had 120 in back-to-back weeks, and then finished in the 70s over the last couple of weeks. And obviously, as we know, week 14 was a low-scoring week, so that's 8 points there, by no means a bad stretch. So you finished quite nicely.
At least that's something, I'd say, and I think that team probably deserved where it finished, to be honest. To say it wasn't a stellar year, and it wasn't like last year where you'd say it was a real Jekyll and Hyde year where I won 6 games and then lost the rest of them after week 6. That wasn't the case. At least there was a bit more to play for. But yes, not the greatest, but still, it's all a bit of fun, and I'm glad that I still do it because it's something that does make your Sunday look. And midweek, of course, makes your Tuesday a bit better too.
Well, not usually the Tuesday, but yeah, mostly the Fridays. But
whenever.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll like I said, we'll do the 8th to 5th ranked teams next week, and obviously the 5th ranked team will be the loser of the Wildcard Bowl in terms of season recaps. We'll be back next week with the recap of the Wildcard Bowl, the previews of the semi-finals effectively, that's that. So thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening, Chris.
Brilliant. It's nice to be here. It's good to do something. So.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. Normally I would say have a nice weekend because we do this fairly aggressively, but I would say have a nice rest of your week, everybody. Best of luck in your matchups, and I don't really care because I've got a bye week, everybody. See you later. Have a good one.